who wasn't? You know, I mean, it's the first one of the first adventure stories you get exposed to. I think what was fun for us was getting past it and starting to understand that world, that the Treasure Island world and the tone of it, while it's become the basis for everything pirate that went after, it is not by any stretch a historical document. It's a campfire story, and the reality that happened before it is really fascinating, and something that it's far more grown up and far more complicated and far more engaging, I think. And so once we were able to dig into that, I think that's when we knew there was something there.
That's why I love the potential for the Long John character, because you see, from what I've seen, thus far, it's like a young, brash, quite different than the image we've all grown up with, on screen and then on the printed page.
I mean, I read the book as a kid, but when we started doing research for the show, and when we started to feel like that might be the basis for the mythology of the show, we reread the book, and it's shockingly modern in terms of its tone. But what I didn't remember, what was one of the most surprising things to me, is that character is written in a way where it feels intentional, that if you can't believe a word that comes out of his mouth, that everything is in service of an agenda, which is great. I mean, that's a fun character to peel apart and figure out how somebody becomes that. You don't get born that way. So yeah, I feel like between that latitude narratively and an actor in Luke who is pretty great, I think people are going to be very excited to get to know him. It should be a lot of fun.
I mean, there's been so many sort of different versions, films, even spin-off books. How do you sort of make it stand out? How do you kind of reinvent it?
I mean, I think the thing about this that at least for me I had never seen before is that it is hopefully rooted with both feet planted in the reality of the world that these people lived in a very human experience that happened. I mean, these people lived in a historical context that I knew a lot about around it, but I didn't know where they fit into it. And once you start to understand it, it becomes something that makes a lot more sense. That these are people who lived in the same world that the people in Boston 60 years later lived in. That it was a system that just didn't have a place for them. That they were too far out on the frontier to be held back by the social norms and the economic framework that was working at the time. And that was fun for me. I mean, it's an interesting world, and so I think and it's a world that I had never really seen fully explored in terms of the violence of it. I mean, these are people who through violence take things, and they get hurt and they die, and you don't see Errol Flynn's buddies not come back. They all go over and they all come back, and then they all seem to be smiling at the end of the day. I can't imagine that's how it was in reality. So that hopefully that's the tone we're able to capture.
So in other words, don't get attached to anybody.
Yeah, it's a rough world out there. Yeah, exactly.
Is this the first real time you've seen Captain Flint explored in any great detail?
It's the first time I have. I mean, when you read that book, especially when we reread it, it kind of reads like an epilogue. I mean, they're the biggest character in the book. I mean, obviously Silver is the presence that drives the story, but Flint's all over it. I mean, it's his decisions, it's his behavior that's setting it all up, and you don't know a thing about him. And everything you know about him, you kind of know a little bit from Silver, and you can't trust anything he said. So it felt like a canvas that was perfect for putting in Cable, to be able to build a character that could live up to it.
So there's going to be a lot of interaction between Long John and Flint. I mean, is Long John serving as quartermaster at this point?
No, I think in the book it is made clear that at one point he was the quartermaster before he became captain. it is strongly suggested that that Flint was deposed, that he had some hand in it, although he never actually takes any responsibility for it. I think that's the spine of the show that will hopefully go on for a very long time. But it's about these two guys. It's about in Captain Flint, a guy with who is driven by some very emotional elemental forces, and this other guy who just is constantly getting in his way, and who somehow is a bit of a cosmic joke, I guess, played on him. That no matter what he does, there's this guy standing in front of him who seems to be undermining him.
Are you kind of playing a sort of historical adventure such as no fantasy aspects at all to their world?
There is no fantasy to it. I mean, I think we're trying to be as faithful as we possibly can to a period in time that really doesn't have a reliable historical record. I think there is historical record to these people, but you have to start to wonder how accurate it is in a world where they had an agenda in the way they projected themselves. So their accounts are skewed. And the English had an agenda in terms of how they portrayed them as criminals and as this sort of as monsters, really. You got us weed through that to start to figure out what was it actually like for them, in their daily life. So that's, I think, what we're trying to be true to. But yeah, no monsters, no ghosts, at least not yet.
What were you looking for when you casted the actors?
It was different for each one. I mean, I think some of them we didn't know what we were looking for until we found it. With some of the characters, you watch an audition and it just clicks. There it is. And with some of them, we knew exactly what we were looking for, and got very lucky.
Can you tell me which ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we saw Toby for Flint, that character absolutely fell into place. We got lucky with all of them. There's not a weak link in this cast. They're all amazingly talented, and I have to say that, but I'm saying it anyway. I mean, it's true. They're all really great, and I think they're all inhabiting these characters in a way that makes them specific and makes them fun and makes them relatable. I'm sorry?
How wide and
we cast all over the place. We had, at one point, we were casting in London, Toronto, Vancouver, New York, Cape Town, Johannesburg, Sydney, Barcelona, Paris, LA, New York, and I'm not sure, there may be a couple more. I mean, we looked everywhere, and it worked, fortunately. So.
Are most of your extras from Cape Town?
Yeah, I mean, we brought about 9 actors, I think, from outside of Cape Town, and everybody else is either Cape Town or Johannesburg local, and really found some stunningly talented actors down there too that I had never seen. I mean, part of the fun of this for us, for people seeing it, is you've just never seen those faces before. They're not people who have been in U.S. TV, and so it's fun to be able to put an unfamiliar face into a show like that and introduce people to it.
How did the idea of a prequel for Treasure Island come about?
I think I think we were looking for something that people could relate to in this world. In trying to upset people's expectations about what the show is going to be, you do want there to be some familiarity. And it was really, as you read this book, you realize that you don't know anything about Flint. You don't know what would drive a guy to do what he did. And in a way, I mean, he's that character is pervasive through the genre. It's mentioned in Peter Pan. It's just this guy who kind of looms over it all, but without much detail. And that became a very exciting opportunity to be able to give that some shape and to understand what drove him. And then at the same time, he felt like a cable character. He felt like a guy that you understood in a Tony Soprano kind of a world, that was both driven to do something awful, but driven by motives that you could understand. So it just, some of this stuff took on a life of its own. Once you were pointed in the right direction, it just wants to be a story.
What are some of the challenges of production?
A lot. This world doesn't exist anywhere. I mean, even if you could shoot in the Bahamas, it's not there anymore. Nassau, the Nassau that was then. And you don't ever want to shoot in the water. It's just not a good idea. So we built it all. We built Nassau, we built the ships, we built water tanks, we built the beach. It's the only way to control it all. And then we hired a very talented VisFX team and VisFX producer in Eric Henry, who did John Adams and had done some really big canvas stuff before, to build the world out. So hopefully it feels immersive, it feels real, it feels like at any point in this story you can turn around at 360 degrees and feel like you're in that place. It's a challenge, but hopefully it's working.
What about Eleanor and Max? How do they fit into all this?
It was really important to Robert and I at the beginning that we figured out a way to have the female characters in this not be in the same way we're trying to upset expectations about what the pirates were. That gender roles are also are addressed and are really engaged. That it's not just that the women are either prostitutes or pirates or whatever. And so we wanted to tell stories about what it was like to be a woman in that world, and what it was like to be a woman specifically in this world where there are no rules, and where things become a meritocracy very quickly when survival is the stakes, I guess, that you're facing every day. And so the two of them are they're driven. They are very much committed to. I guess challenging the expectations that the world has placed upon them.
All right.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.